Hey, so I'm here with the Polyend Tracker because they've released 1.7 and I'm very happy, and I'll leave a link down below so you can go and install it. But really, I just wanted to make a video just going and highlighting what they've included and go about like how it's changing my workflow. They have removed one thing, so I thought I'd have a bit of a discussion about that, and yeah, just overall how I feel about their new update. So let's get straight into it. Alright, I've got both my trackers out, and this one's got 1.6 and this one's got 1.7 because I think it's really important to show what's going on the screen, because there's a lot of nice little features and tweaks that they've done, but altogether 1.7 has brought a lot of life improvements to the device. So I'm probably going to start with probably my favorite part and probably the most nerdiest part, is it's brought a new way to manage our projects. Before, what we will do is we'll go save and then maybe give it a name, something that we hope we could remember, because then what would happen is it goes into this list, and it's probably like hidden up here because you can only have 100 songs in the project file. And then what you'll do is go in here and fish it. So what I try and do is have a good naming convention where it's like we have a name, we have like D&B, which is drum and bass, and running at 165 beats per minute. But what would happen is I would play this live. I'll have all the files that I'll need to play, and then I would have both of them load with the same files. So if I wanted to do a different set, I'll need to create different songs, save these out in a different way, and then come back and make sure they're both the same, and that's probably the only set I can play. However, with 1.7, they have given us a really nice way to manage our files. So green is the actual projects themselves, and then white is the file itself. So if we go into there, we can actually take all those drum and bass projects and stick them in this folder, and then we can sort of organize it to be like this is a set that we have planned. We can have different sets for different things, like I've got a few break beats and chiptune based stuff on there. So we can take that file and duplicate across both, so they've got the same information, but it's that one point of call. So we can see this is going to be our D&B set. And I find that really helpful, especially playing live with these things on stage. It's just the way I wanted to use these things when I first got them, was to have a device that I could run around with sound, and like I can make the music on it, but I can also play the music on it. And talking about this color coding here, you probably notice there's a lot of color coding in the new pattern view. Like we have all the colors down here. So it's like we have like input values for the green, and then we have functions for like the red. So it's like we have our fill tool, we have all our pattern tools as well, and then you have this yellow bar up here, which is another nice neat little feature, because on the original Polyend Tracker, like if we were to jump up and down, we couldn't really see, like if I put a note there, we can't see that note. But on this one, if I put a note up there, I can still see it. So it gives us a way to visually see what the loop is doing, and then we can sort of make that as an informed decision. It's not like this is going to show the previous pattern before it, but it adds a really nice feature as well, and that's vertical revolver. And there's another little thing you probably see here, like I do usually work in hexadecimal, so it counts to 16 with A to F, which puts 10 for the first bar 0 bit. Some people, hexadecimal is a bit much, but what they've done is they've added a new feature, so it starts from 0. Very programmatic, but it does make sure that that first bar, it lands on 16. So you just have simple numbers. Like when I was first trying to use the tracker, like having the first bar being 17 didn't sort of ring well in my brain, so that's why I used hexadecimal, but this is definitely going to be something a little bit nicer. Now this user interface stuff isn't just for the pattern view, they've put this through the entire device. So it's like if we go to sample playback, I've loaded a sample onto this one, because what we had before is we just had like the marker, and we could see the color of the marker was the one that we were working on. But this marker has a little bit more information, because right now it's on a 0 point. You can't, like this is so we stop clicks in that. But if I scroll away from that 0 point, it'll turn red. And that's telling me that it's not on a 0 point. So lots of little visual information stuff that's going on here. If we go into like the sample editor, it's going to work in there. Same thing with the sample recorder. We have a nice big record button, which is really nice. We also have a nice little metronome. So we can come in here and we can activate the metronome, which you can also find it in the config setting. You probably notice that they put a few of these buttons around to like navigate to certain areas. But when we go to record our sound, so the metronome is ready to record. So I'm just going to go back. We'll hear counting. So if we've got an instrument that we're trying to play live or to a click track, that is going to help us be able to record a whole bunch of cool things. So we'll just cancel that because alongside the user interface, they've also done some nice user experience stuff. So we'll just do that recording again. Say I want to save this blank sort of sample out, make it whatever you will. Like before, if we were to make a sample or something and we wanted to use the arrow keys to navigate, see how it won't like wrap around? We can actually have some wraparound stuff. And that by itself might seem like such a simple little thing, but if you're like working here and making a whole bunch of samples and having to name them, like I use the keyboard, sometimes I'm running around like that, it just makes that sort of input a little bit easier to work with. Alright, so besides the pretties and the quality of life stuff, they've actually done some work to the audio tools themselves. So if we just jump into the sample editor, specifically, they've done some work on the EQ, the compressor, and the limiter. So I'm just going to pick the equalizer so we can have a bit of a check. Before we only had like a very basic view of there, and like as you can see, they've separated out a lot more of that. So they're going to behave differently, but in the end, they're going to improve like getting the right sound for you. Now, besides the sample editor, they've done some extra things. So if we go over to the master, as you can see, we have different saturation modes. So we can add sort of that poly and play flavor, so we can like really crunch the sound or create different styles. So besides the sample editor improvements and the saturation, I feel a lot of the work went into the back end of the Polyend Tracker, because what they managed to do is give us some extra headroom on the device. If you've played with the Polyend Tracker before, you probably realize when you start playing chords and that, it's really easy to saturate the sound, so you have to drop the volume, and this is just so we got a lot of extra space to work with. So really happy with that. And like the other big one is that snap to zero. So when I was in the sample editor playing with the start, how it was like going green, that will allow it to snap to position. So really nice features to help us deal with the audio on the Polyend Tracker. Now, audio stuff is really cool and I'd be happy with that, but I feel the other major thing that they're working on the back end of the Polyend Tracker was the Midi implementation. Like with 1.6, it was a little bit jittery. We'd get our sync and it did work, and like for me it worked well, but for some, like they need that preciseness. So from the notes, it looks like they completely redesigned the Midi implementation and they've added some features, so it's a lot more stable and like we can actually correct the actual clock. So very happy to see that stuff. Like this is how I would want to go onto stage, but it would be nice to have like some sort of little synth to run alongside it so I can have those synth-based sounds. And yeah, it is something that really likes to play with other things, so I'm definitely happy to see that. So I think it's really cool to have Midi going out, but with Midi coming in, they've done some like nice little UX things. So if you come into where you can adjust the live effects, you can actually jump to the instrument synthesizer. So it doesn't run as like the Polyend Tracker. You actually can like bring a little keyboard out here and play the Polyend Tracker like a polyphonic instrument, so it's got 8 notes. So it's just a nice button to be able to get to this section here. We can see the CCs on our keyboard, so if we want to like tweak the settings, we can do that. And yeah, just a nice thing to have. So these are the major things I wanted to point out because I think that's the most important parts of the Polyend Tracker. I will leave links down below to the actual list of what they've changed, because there was a lot of changes and fixes going on. And they've also updated the manual in here, so that'll be a nice way to use the Polyend Tracker to learn the Polyend Tracker. But there is one thing that we did lose that I wanted to point out, because it was something a part of my pipeline, and that was if we go into file and export, we can export as an IT file here, but if we go file and export here, we have lost that functionality. We also have lost the ability to get mod files in on the device as well. And really a mod or IT file is sort of like a tracker format that used to work with yesteryear's trackers. Now I did actually use that export IT feature in a couple of my pipelines. So these are some of the sounds that I made for a game project. So these are the music files, and I use IT export to actually get the sounds into Unity, which is a game engine, and then I was able to play those IT files in the back end. So if you're interested in that, I'll leave a link below. But the other way I use those IT files was to take the song information and be able to export it into a bigger tracker like Renoise is the main one I use on the computer. And it did work. I did have to change the way I thought about making sounds, because I feel a lot of the sounds I have to make like a one shot, and that's how it's going to play. So all the like sort of automation stuff I'll do with the LFOs and that didn't really carry across in the IT file. So in the end, after reading the notes and sort of the discussions that was happening in the forums around Polyend and these devices, they sort of came to the conclusion like the mod files and that was really cool, but how it was implemented wasn't really supporting the tracker. So in the end, they decided to remove it and then do a bit of future seeking with the community to see if it's a feature that people actually want. So I'll definitely be in favor of it. I feel the bigger discussion with these sort of like next generation devices, like how do we get them talking with each other? So there's a few discussions happening in that area. But this isn't my first rodeo dealing with this sort of stuff, because like back in the day dealing with LSDJ, like this one has the latest version of the LSDJ software, but there was a period where they did some updates on how the instrument runs, and it sort of wrecked a whole bunch of my songs. So I do run with a few different versions of the tracker, just so that the songs are the way I intended, the way they sound. So I'm expecting to do something similar where I have like 1.6 in the back end, because really we can just leave 1.6 on the actual device. So if we come down to here and go update firmware, as you can see I've got a few different firmwares running, and I just leave it on the version I need. But if I need that backwards compatibility, I can bring it back. The project might sound a bit different, so always test and duplicate your files before doing something like that. But I can also keep SD cards around with the different versions. So I am bummed, but not super bummed. But please feel free to have a civil conversation down below about this removal of the feature, because I think it's good to have that discussion about how they're going to talk to each other, because it's like removing that, I can't really talk to other trackers, but the Polyend Tracker and the Tracker Mini, they seem to be really working together to make them talk to each other. So they talk about a lot of, you do something on the Polyend Tracker and then you can push it onto the Mini. What I'm more interested to know is how the Mini will actually go into the original Polyend Tracker. I know there's like file size differences and like stereo samples versus mono samples, but really this is what I want to take on stage. This is how I want to play, and it's like having a Tracker Mini Pro be something that would be cool as a I'm on the bus or I'm on a flight, and that's how I'm making music. It's like I can pull it out of my bag and have 5 seconds with it. Same way I treat the tracker, it's just going to be in a smaller package. So that's why I'm more interested to see what happens here. So in the end, I'm quite happy what this feature list has for us. So I'm probably going to update both with 1.7 and go from there. So in the end of all this, I'm very happy with 1.7. All those features has been very nice additions to help with the workflow. And yeah, if I do get stuck in a point where I am specifically needing something to get it on Renoise or speak to some other tracker, definitely going to backload 1.6 and work on that. But really, like the way I've been using the tracker more and more has been very standalone with the device. So I hope this has given you a bit of a run through on what is what. And they have mentioned multiple times that this isn't the end of the Polyend Tracker, like they've already started planning 1.8. So definitely get ideas in there to say what you would like to see. I hope to see more of those sort of quality of life improvements, ways that we can navigate around, maybe have some ways that we can move samples around. But really, like, the Polyend Tracker is such a good little machine at the moment, so definitely worth mucking around with. And in the end, if you did enjoy this one and you think that this should be sent to other people, people should be downloading their firmware update, so definitely give it a thumbs up. It does tell the algorithm here to point this video to other people. And if you do have any comments or queries, please feel free to leave them down below. And like I said before, like, it can be a bit of a heated discussion, so keep it civil downstairs, because yeah, I think it's good to have that sort of discussion, because I think the Polyend has a lot of potential to be able to talk to other devices. So how that does it, and it's like with all that new MIDI stuff, it's like it's going to work a lot better with these machines here. So yeah, just have that discussion. And in the end, if you like this one and you want to stick around or see more of my Polyend Tracker content, I look forward to seeing you next time.